Hello, my name is Ryan, and welcome back to the SleepStory Collective. I'm really glad you are here tonight. At the SleepStory Collective, we keep things beautifully simple. We only have one mission: to help you unwind, let the day fall quiet, and ease gently into sleep. Tonight, we will not hurry. We will not try to force the mind to become still before it is ready. We will simply give it somewhere softer to go. A quiet place, a garden place, a moonlit place, a place where the paths are safe, the lanterns are low, and the flowers open only when the world has become calm enough to notice them. From wherever the evening has found you, from a room already still, from a house settling slowly, from somewhere warm, somewhere cool, somewhere full of distant noise or nearly silent already, welcome. We are glad you made it here. You can arrive with the day still on you. You can arrive with thoughts unfinished. You can arrive with a body that feels heavier than usual, or a mind that has not quite learned that it is allowed to stop. There is no need to fix that before the story begins. There is no need to make yourself feel peaceful. Peace can come towards you slowly. Rest can begin before sleep. And sometimes the kindest thing is not to push the mind away from its thoughts, but to lead it gently into a world where the thoughts lose their sharp edges. If this story reaches someone on a night when they need a little softness, it may be because another listener left a small sign behind. A like, a quiet comment, a gentle trace that helped the path stay open for the next tired person. But for now, there is nothing for you to do. Not one more task, not one more answer, not one more performance of being fine. You can let your attention come back to the body. Let the forehead soften. Let the space around the eyes grow easy. Let the jaw loosen, even a little. You may have been holding more there than you realized. A thought, a response, a conversation, a little piece of the day still trying to finish itself. Let it soften now. It does not need to finish before you rest. Let the shoulders drop away from the ears. Let the arms become heavy. Let the hands rest wherever they are. Hands carry so much of a life. They open doors, hold cups, send messages, prepare food, smooth blankets, carry bags, comfort others, count coins, lift children, Fold clothes. Press palms together in thought. Reach for one more thing. Tonight, let them be still. Let them be empty. Let them do nothing beautifully. Take a slow breath in, only as much as feels kind, and let it go. Another breath in, softly, and out again. There is no technique to master here, no perfect way to breathe, only a body being reminded gently that the night has arrived. Let the chest soften. Let the stomach loosen. Let the back of the body feel supported. Let the legs become a little heavier. Let the feet release the invisible roads they have been walking all day. Some roads are outside. Some are inside. Some are made of duties. Some are made of conversations. Some are made of memories, lists, worries, plans, and things we meant to do. You do not have to walk those roads now. Not tonight. Not in this hour. Imagine that the day is a cloak you have worn since morning, a cloak of small decisions, a cloak of other people's needs, a cloak of effort, a cloak of staying steady. You do not have to throw it away. You do not have to judge it. You can simply unfasten it at the throat. Let it slip from your shoulders. Let it fold itself over the back of a chair. It will be there tomorrow if anything truly needs you. But for now, it can rest too. Tonight, we are going to a garden in a quiet fairytale valley. A garden that cannot be entered loudly. A garden that does not open its deepest paths in daylight. By morning, it looks like a beautiful but ordinary place. Stone arches, clipped hedges, white flowers, long pools, a little glass house, a row of benches under pear trees. But when the moon rises and the final gold leaves the sky, the moonflowers begin to wake. Their petals loosen. Their pale cups turn towards the stars. And along the winding paths, the lanterns inside those flowers begin to glow. Not all at once, not brightly. One by one, like thoughts becoming kind, like windows being lit for someone coming home, like small promises placed gently in the dark. And there is a lady who walks those paths every night. She is not hurried. She is not grand in the noisy way. She carries a brass taper, a basket of glass wicks, a little book of names, and a shawl the color of mist. Her work is to light the moonflower lanterns, Some lanterns are for garden paths. Some are for travelers who will pass before dawn. Some are for sleepers whose windows face the valley. Some are for those who have carried too much and need a quiet light to remind the heart that it is safe to soften. She lights them carefully. She trims them when their glow grows uneven. She shelters them from wind. She speaks to them as though every flower is a small room where peace might live. Let the garden appear now, slowly. Stone path beneath the moon, white blossoms opening beside it, soft grass, warm lanterns, a silver fountain, a sleeping valley beyond the wall, and the lady of the moonflower lanterns walking gently ahead, not asking you to keep up, only letting the path be visible. Let your body become heavier. Let the story carry more of the weight. Let the night come closer, kind and unthreatening. And when you are ready, we will begin. Tonight's story is called The Lady Who Lights the Moonflower Lanterns. In the valley of Astercombe, the evening did not fall quickly. It arrived in layers. First, the sunlight loosened from the hills. Then the fields turned from green to gold. Then the windows of the cottages caught the last light and held it for a little while, as though reluctant to let go. After that, the river darkened. The birds settled in the apple trees. Smoke rose from chimneys in soft blue threads. The old clock in the village square struck 7 with a sound like a spoon touching a china cup. Only then did the valley begin to belong to the moon. Astercombe was not a large valley. It held 1 village, 2 orchards, 3 footbridges, a small chapel with a round bell tower, a mill pond, a sheep meadow, and a winding lane that climbed towards the eastern ridge. At the top of that ridge stood a walled garden. People in the valley called it the Moonflower Garden, not because it had only moonflowers. It had roses, thyme, lavender, pear trees, ferns, silver grass, and winter jasmine. It had a little glass house where citrus trees were kept. It had a fountain shaped like 3 falling leaves. It had a stone pergola covered in pale climbing vines. But the moonflowers were what people remembered. They grew along every main path. They climbed the arches. They gathered around the pools. They leaned beside the benches. They rose in tall white cups near the garden gate. By day, they were closed, neat, and quiet. Beautiful, yes, but modest. By night, they opened. And when they opened, their lanterns could be lit. No one in Astercombe could say exactly when the first moonflower lantern had bloomed. The oldest people in the valley said it had always been so. Their grandparents had spoken of it, their grandparents before them too. There were stories, of course. Valleys like Astercombe keep stories in their hedgerows the way some people keep letters in drawers. One story said that a wandering gardener had planted the first seeds during a summer when the moon seemed closer than usual. Another said the flowers had grown from tears of relief cried by an old queen after her son returned safely from a long journey. A third said that the flowers were once ordinary white blooms until the moon looked down, saw that travelers had trouble finding the ridge path after dark, and placed a little light inside each one. No one argued about which version was true. The people of Astercombe were wise enough to know that some places become poorer when all their mysteries are forced into one answer. So they kept all three stories, and the moonflowers kept opening. The garden belonged to the old house on the ridge. The house was called Silvermere. It had gray stone walls, tall chimneys, and windows that reflected the sky so clearly they seemed almost to have weather inside them. Silvermere had once been a manor house, then a summer house, then a school for young painters. Then, for a while, it had stood nearly empty except for one caretaker, 2 cats, and a great many swallows in the eaves. Now it was lived in by Lady Isolde Wren. Lady Isolde was not old, though people sometimes imagined the keeper of such a garden must be. She was in that gentle middle season of life where a person has gathered enough memories to move carefully, but not so many that wonder has gone out of the world. She had warm brown eyes, silver beginning at one temple, and a way of walking that made gravel sound softer beneath her feet. Her clothes were plain by the standards of grand houses: soft wool dresses in winter, cotton gowns in summer, a shawl in all seasons, always good pockets, always practical shoes. People sometimes called her a lady because of the house, the garden, and the old family line that came with both. But children in Astercombe liked her because she noticed things adults often missed: a loose ribbon on a kite, a pebble shaped like a mouse, a bird nest fallen safely after the chicks had flown, a child trying very hard not to cry after scraping a knee. She never made a fuss. She only made room. By day, Lady Isolde worked in the garden like any other gardener. She weeded, she pruned, she turned soil, she labeled seed trays, she checked the glasshouse vents, she wrote planting notes in a book with green covers. She carried baskets of herbs down to the village kitchen when there were too many. She tied up vines. She collected fallen petals. She knew which rose disliked too much morning sun. She knew where the foxgloves seated themselves without asking. She knew that the old pear tree near the west wall needed to be spoken to kindly in March, when it always looked as though it might not blossom again. But the work that belonged most deeply to her began after dusk. When the moonflowers opened, Lady Isolde lit the lanterns. Not every flower held one. Only the old moonflowers, the ones whose stems had turned pale green and whose cups had grown large enough to cradle a tiny glass wick. Inside those flowers was a natural hollow, delicate and white, lined with a sheen that caught moonlight. If a glass wick was placed there and touched with silver flame, the whole flower glowed from within. No heat, no smoke, no burning, only light. A living lantern. On the night our story begins, the day had been warm and windless. A summer day. The sort of day when bees moved slowly from lavender to thyme, and even the shadows under the benches looked restful. By evening, a little coolness had risen from the river below. The air smelled of grass, stone, roses, and the faint green breath of leaves settling after sun. Lady Isolde stood in the still room at the back of Silvermere, preparing the night basket. The still room was one of her favorite places in the house. It had a flagstone floor, a deep sink, shelves of jars, bundles of dried herbs hanging from ceiling beams, and a long table worn smooth by generations of hands. By day, it was used for making lavender water, rose salve, pear cordial, mint syrup, and little linen sachets for guest rooms. At night, it became the place where the lantern work began. On the table lay the things she needed: a brass taper in a narrow holder, a box of glass wicks, a pair of tiny silver scissors, a folded cloth, a bottle of dew oil, a small spoon, a notebook, and a shallow basket lined with soft moss. The glass wicks looked like tiny stems. Each one had been made by the village glassblower, but not from ordinary glass. They were made from window fragments, old lamp panes, and clear bottle pieces that had been washed, melted, and drawn into fine, hollow threads. Every wick was different. Some were perfectly straight, some curved slightly, some held tiny bubbles, some were clear, some had a faint blush of blue, green, gold, or rose. Lady Isolde chose them one by one, not quickly, not carelessly. Each moonflower lantern preferred a certain kind of wick. The West Path flowers liked clear wicks. The fountain flowers liked blue. The orchard gate flowers preferred gold. And the two old flowers near the resting bench, the ones that opened beside the stone seat overlooking the whole valley, liked rose-colored wicks best. Lady Isolde placed the wicks in the basket. Then she took up the brass taper. The taper's flame was not kept in the still room. It rested in a little shrine by the eastern window, inside a glass cup no larger than an egg. The flame had been lit from moonlight long before Lady Isolde was born. Each keeper of the garden tended it. No one claimed to understand how it continued. It did not burn wax. It did not consume oil. It only waited. When evening came, it leaned towards the garden. Lady Isolde lifted the glass cup and touched the brass taper to the small silver flame. The taper lit at once. A quiet flame, pale, steady, almost white. She lowered her head. "Good evening, little light," she whispered. The flame did not answer, of course, but it steadied, which was close enough. Before leaving the still room, Lady Isolde opened her notebook. The first page held the same words every night. Open the garden gently. Light what is ready. Leave what is resting. Return with thanks. Underneath, she wrote the date, the moon phase, the weather, and the first note of the evening. Near full moon. Day warm. Air cooling. No wind. Flowers expected to open fully. Valley quiet. She paused, listening through the open window. From below came the faint sound of the village. A cart being put away. Someone laughing softly near the bakery. A dog shaking itself after walking through long grass. The chapel bell striking 8. Then the sound of the river, thin and constant beneath everything. Valley quiet, she wrote again, and underlined it once. Not silent, quiet. There was a difference. Silence was absence. Quiet was presence at rest. She took up the basket, the taper, and a shawl the color of mist. Then she left the still room by the garden door. The first step outside always felt like crossing into another kind of time. The air was cooler than the room behind her. The sky above Silvermere had deepened to blue. Not black. Not yet. A blue that still remembered the day, but had accepted the moon. The garden wall held the last warmth of sunset. The gravel path shone faintly. Far below, the cottage windows of Astercombe glowed one by one, scattered along the valley like small earthly stars. Lady Isolde stood at the top of the first path and breathed. She terms bed lifetime immediately. The garden had to be greeted. She looked to the east beds. The moonflowers there were beginning to loosen. She looked to the fountain walk. A few had already opened. She looked to the orchard gate. Still closed. No hurry. Flowers, like people, had their own timing. She turned towards the first path and began. The first moonflower of the night grew beside the kitchen steps. It was not the oldest flower in the garden, nor the grandest, but Lady Isolde always began there because it was closest to the house. A house, she felt, deserved to be lit from its threshold outward. The moonflower's petals had opened into a wide white cup. Inside, the hollow was visible, pale and waiting. Lady Isolde selected a clear wick from the basket. She dipped its base into a drop of dew oil held on the spoon, then placed it carefully inside the flower. The wick settled. She touched the tip with the silver taper. The light moved down through the wick and into the flower. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the whole bloom glowed, softly, warm white, like a lamp behind linen. Lady Isolde smiled. "Good evening, first one," she said. the flower held steady. In the still room window behind her, the reflection of the lit moonflower appeared as a small, round glow. The house had received its first lantern. The second and third flowers grew along the herb path. This path was narrow and bordered by low beds of thyme, sage, mint, lemon balm, and lavender. During the day, bees loved it. At night, the herbs seemed to fold their scents inward until touched by passing air. As Lady Isolde walked, the hem of her dress stirred the mint, and the scent rose cool and clean. The second flower preferred a wick with a tiny blue bubble in it. The third took a straight, clear wick. She lit them both. Now the herb path glowed in 3 soft points, enough to show the stones, but not enough to wake the sleeping bees tucked somewhere deep among the lavender. Lady Isolde trimmed one small leaf that had curled across a flower cup, not because it was wrong, only because it shaded the hollow too much. She laid the leaf in her basket. Nothing from the moonflower path was thrown away at night. Leaves, fallen petals, wick dust, loose moss, all were carried back and placed in the compost bowl by morning. Even small endings could become part of the next season. From the herb path, she turned towards the fountain walk. The fountain stood at the center of the garden, where 4 paths met. It was made of pale stone and shaped like 3 falling leaves, one above another. Water slipped from the highest leaf into the second, then from the second into the shallow basin below. The sound was soft, not a splash, not a trickle, a continual giving. Around the fountain grew a ring of tall moonflowers. These were older. Their stems were strong. Their leaves were wide. Their cups opened higher than Lady Isolde's waist. Each one held a hollow large enough for a blue glass wick. Blue wicks made the fountain lanterns glow like moonlight seen through water. Lady Isolde knelt on the stone edge and placed the first wick, then the second, then the third, then the fourth. She turned the taper to each one. The flowers lit slowly around the fountain. 1, 2, 3, 4. The water caught their light and carried it down from leaf to leaf. Now the basin held 4 blue-white reflections, trembling gently. Lady Isolde dipped her fingers into the water and touched the dampness to her forehead, not as a spell, not as a performance, only as a habit of gratitude. The fountain had worked all day. It deserved to be acknowledged. She opened the notebook. Fountain walk. 4 blue wicks. Water clear. Sound even. No wind. Reflections steady. Then she stood and looked out over the garden. More flowers had opened while she worked. This was the way of moonflower lighting. One lantern encouraged another. A path that had seemed dim a few minutes before now showed white cups ready on both sides. Lady Isolde took up the basket and moved north. The northern path led under a stone arch covered in climbing roses. The roses were pale pink by day. At night they looked almost gray, but their scent grew stronger, warm and faintly honeyed. Moonflowers climbed among them, their white cups opening from the darker wheels. Here, the lanterns had to be lit carefully. Too much light and the roses would look faded. Too little and the arch would feel closed. Lady Isolde chose wicks with a slight golden tint. Gold softened the white of the moonflowers and made the rose petals glow as though remembering sunset. She lit 5 lanterns under the arch. The path beyond became visible. A green bench, a little stone bird bath, a trail of pale gravel, the first fireflies of the season moving low over the grass. Lady Isolde paused to watch them. Fireflies had their own lantern work. She never interrupted it. Beyond the rose arch was the listening lawn. It was called that because sounds gathered there gently. The fountain behind, the river below, the orchard leaves to the west, the chapel bell from the valley, the night birds in the hedgerows. Everything arrived softened, as if the lawn itself had decided to receive the world kindly. Around the lawn stood 6 moonflower lanterns on curved stems. These flowers leaned inward, making a loose circle. Lady Isolde often imagined them as listeners. She lit them with clear wicks. One by one, the circle glowed. The grass inside took on a silver sheen. A moth crossed the center and disappeared. Lady Isolde sat for a moment on the green bench. The work did not require sitting, but the garden did. If she only moved from task to task, she would become efficient. Efficiency had its place, but this was not a factory of light. It was a garden, and a garden could not be cared for properly by someone who never sat in it. She let the basket rest beside her. The taper burned steadily in its holder. The silver flame did not shorten. The 6 listening flowers shone around the lawn. Lady Isolde looked down into the valley. From here she could see the village square. The bakery windows still glowed. The mill pond reflected a small piece of sky. The chapel tower rose pale in the moonlight. The lane to the west bridge lay in shadow, except where 2 village lanterns burned beside the low stone wall. The people of Astacum often said the garden lanterns made the whole valley sleep more easily. Lady Isolde did not know whether that was true. She never claimed it. She only knew that when the moonflower lanterns were lit, the valley looked held, not watched, not guarded, held. There was comfort in that difference. If you are beginning to feel the edges of the day soften, I am glad. Subscribing to the SleepStory Collective means gentle places like this can be waiting for you whenever night feels too heavy or the mind feels too full. For now, let us stay with Lady Isolde a little longer, where the moonflowers are opening and the path ahead is lit one soft lantern at a time. After resting on the listening lawn, Lady Isolde rose and continued towards the pear walk. The pear walk was one of the oldest parts of the garden. 2 rows of pear trees stood on either side of a long path, their branches trained over curved wooden frames. In spring, it became a tunnel of blossom. In late summer, fruit hung in little paper covers tied with twine. Tonight, the pears were still small and green, tucked among leaves that shimmered under moonlight. Moonflowers grew at the base of each tree. These were not tall, they were low and wide, their cups tilted slightly upward. The pear walk lanterns were not for seeing far ahead, they were for walking slowly. Lady Isolde chose small gold wicks. She lit the first flower at the entrance, then walked 10 steps, lit another, 10 steps, another. The path began to glow in intervals. Light, shadow, light, shadow, light, shadow. A rhythm for the feet, a rhythm for breathing. A reminder that a path does not need to be lit all the way to the end before one can begin walking it. Only the next few steps, then the next, then the next. Halfway down the pear walk, Lady Isolde stopped beside the oldest tree. Its trunk was twisted and wide. At its base was a hollow where children sometimes left small treasures. A feather, a conker, a smooth stone, a ribbon from a birthday parcel. Tonight, in the hollow, someone had left a folded note held down with a white pebble. Lady Isolde picked it up. The handwriting was uneven but careful. Please light the pear walk kindly tonight. My grandmother likes to see it from her window. She says the little lights make her remember walking here before her knees were old. No name, only a drawing of a small pear at the bottom. Lady Isolde folded the note gently and placed it in her notebook. Then she looked down the hill towards the village. There, above the lane, was a cottage with a high, narrow window facing the garden. She knew the grandmother, Mrs. Elwick, a woman who had once baked pear cakes for every harvest supper and now watched most of the seasons from her upstairs chair. Lady Isolde chose 2 extra gold wicks from the basket. She knit the moonflowers nearest the viewing gap in the hedge, then turned their stems slightly, not bending, only guiding. The lights would be visible from Mrs. Elwick's window. A small kindness, a remembered path. That was good work. She wrote in her notebook, pear walk, gold wicks, request left by child. Lights turned towards Mrs. Elwick's window. Old tree holding note. Then she stood beneath the branches and listened. The pear walk was quieter than the listening lawn, more private. The leaves above her moved faintly. A single unripe pear knocked very softly against its paper cover. Somewhere below, a window latch closed. Lady Isolde imagined Mrs. Elwick sitting by her high window, perhaps already asleep, perhaps not. The lights would be there either way. A gift did not fail because someone slept before seeing it. Sometimes a gift did its best work by waiting. At the end of the pear walk stood the western gate. The gate was not often used. It opened onto a narrow track that led down towards the sheep meadow. Beside the gate grew the old traveler's moonflowers. They were tall, pale, and weathered. Their stems had twisted from years of wind. Their lantern cups faced outward, away from the garden, towards the track. These lanterns were lit for anyone walking before dawn. The shepherd, the midwife, the miller going early to the river. A neighbor called out for help with a birth, a fever, or a frightened horse. The western gate flowers did not need beauty, though they had it. They needed reliability. Lady Isolde checked each stem. One had a torn leaf. One hollow held a little rainwater left from last week. One wick from the previous night had cracked and needed to be removed. She worked carefully. She dried the hollow with the folded cloth. She trimmed the torn leaf. She replaced the cracked wick with a straight, clear one. Then she lit the gate lanterns. Their glow was stronger than the others, still gentle, still soft, but more practical. Enough to show the latch, enough to show the first bend of the track, enough to keep a person from feeling alone when they stepped from garden light into open night. Lady Isolde stood by the gate for a while after lighting them. She liked the view west. The sheep meadow lay below, pale under the moon. Beyond it, a line of dark hedges. Beyond that, the road to the next village. A single star shone low over the ridge. The gate lanterns lit the moss on the wall and the worn place where many hands had touched the latch. She wrote, "Western Gate." 3 traveling's lanterns lit. 1 wick replaced. Track visible to first bend. Meadow quiet. Then she closed the notebook and took a breath. There was something deeply restful about practical kindness. A gate that opened smoothly. A path visible before dawn. A latch warmed by use. Not every comfort needed to be poetic. Some comfort was simply being able to see where to put your foot. From the western gate, the path turned south through the silver grass. This part of the garden had no benches and no trees, only soft ornamental grass that moved even when the air felt still. By day, the grass was pale green. At night, it became almost white. Moonflower lanterns here were set low among the stems, hidden until lit. Lady Isolde knelt and brushed the grass aside with one hand. There was the first lantern cup, then the second, then the third. These flowers liked wicks with tiny bubbles inside them. The bubbles caught light and scattered it gently through the grass. When she lit them, the whole silver grass bed shimmered, not brightly, like breath moving through frost. The effect was so delicate that Lady Isolde stayed low for a moment, not wanting to disturb it by standing too quickly. A small night beetle climbed a blade of grass. A dewdrop trembled. The moonflowers held their glow. The world was very quiet there. A little farther on, the path narrowed between two hedges of box and bay. At the center of this narrow place was the Hush Arch. The Hush Arch was made of living willow, trained over many years into a low green tunnel. During the day, it was pleasant. At night, after the lanterns were lit, it became one of the most peaceful places in the garden. The moonflowers here were small and close together, too many to light individually with full wicks. Instead, Lady Isolde used thread wicks, fine strands of glass, thinner than hair, laid patron between the flower cups. When the first one was lit, the growl traveled slowly along the thread and woke each flower in turn. She set the thread with both hands, then touching the first cup with the silver taper. The light moved. One flower, then the next, then the next. A soft chain of braidos forming along the willow arch. The tunnel brightened as if the moon had decided to rest inside it. Lady Isolde stepped beneath. The wooth outside became quieter at once. The Hush Arch did not silence sound. It softened the need to account it. She stood under the arch and let the glow surround her. This was where she came when her own mind was too full. Not often, but sometimes. Even keepers of quiet gardens have thoughts that do not settle easily. A decision about repairs, a letter from a cousin, the memory of someone who once walked the garden beside her, the ordinary ache of being responsible for something loved. On those nights, Lady Isolde did not ask the garden to take her thoughts away. She only stood beneath the Hush Arch and let the thoughts become less sharp. Tonight, she did not feel troubled, only tender. The garden was opening beautifully. The valley was peaceful. The lanterns were taking their light well. Still, she allowed herself a few breaths beneath the arch. In and out. In and out. The flowers glowed around her. The willow held its shape. The night asked nothing. Beyond the Hush Arch was the moon pool. The pool was long and narrow, edged with pale stone. At one end, a statue of a sleeping deer rested beneath ferns. At the other, a shallow step allowed birds to drink during the day. The water reflected the sky so clearly that at night it was sometimes hard to tell where the pool ended and the heavens began. Moonflowers grew in stone troughs along both sides. Their lanterns reflected in the water when lit, making the pool appear twice as full of light. Lady Isolde chose blue-white wicks for this path. She lit the left side first, then the right. One by one, the reflections appeared below. Flower above, flower below. Lantern above, lantern below. Moon above, moon below. The sleeping deer seemed to float between worlds. Lady Isolde sat on the stone edge and opened the notebook. Moon pool, blue-white wicks, water clear, no leaves on surface, deer statue dry, reflections steady. She paused, then added, very still. That was all. Sometimes a good note was very short. As she sat beside the moon pool, she heard footsteps on the gravel beyond the garden door. Not hurried, not secretive. A familiar step. She turned and saw old Bennett, the caretaker of Silvermere, standing near the archway with his cap in his hands. He was not a servant in the stiff old sense. Silvermere had given up that sort of formality years ago. Bennett had been born in the valley, had worked in the gardens as a boy, left for 20 years to repair railway clocks in the city, then returned to Astercombe with a pocket watch, a bad knee, and a deep appreciation for quiet. "Good evening, my lady," he said softly. "Good evening, Bennett. Are the lower lamps behaving?" "Mostly. The lamp by the south steps is flickering again. I will see to it before bed." "No hurry," Lady Isolde said. "It has flickered for 3 nights and harmed no one." Bennett smiled. "That is true." Then he held out a small packet wrapped in brown paper. "From the glassblower. He said the rose wicks are finished." Lady Isolde took the packet. "The 2 resting bench flowers will be pleased." Bennett looked out across the moon pool. "The garden is fine tonight." "It is." He nodded once. "I will leave you to the lighting then." "Sleep kindly when you get there," Lady Isolde said. Bennett touched his cap. "That is the plan." He turned and went back along the gravel path, his footsteps fading gently. Lady Isolde unwrapped the packet. Inside were 4 rose-tinted wicks, each one curled at the base like a tendril. The village glassblower had outdone himself. The old flowers by the resting bench liked rose wicks because their lanterns were meant for comfort rather than guidance. The resting bench stood at the highest point of the garden, under a white beam tree. From there, one could see the entire valley. People were allowed into that part of the garden on certain evenings. Not many at once, only 1 or 2. A person recovering from illness, a widow on the anniversary of a loss, a mother who needed half an hour alone, a child who had been frightened by a storm, a traveler who arrived too late for the admin and needed a quiet place before continuing. Lady Isolde did not ask questions at the resting bench. She lit the flowers. She left water. She returned later. That was usually enough. She placed the rose wicks carefully in the basket and continued from the moon pool to the south steps. As Bennett had said, the lamp there was flickering. This was not a moonflower lantern, but a little wall lamp beside the steps leading back toward Silvermere. Its flame had become uneven because a moth had settled near the vent. Lady Isolde lifted the glass gently. The moth moved onto her finger. A soft brown moth, almost leaf-shaped. She carried it to the bay hedge and let it rest there. Then she trimmed the wick, lowered the flame, and replaced the glass. The lamp steadied. She wrote in her book, "South step lamp trimmed, moth relocated to bay hedge, flame steady." She found herself smiling at the formality of the note. Moth relocated to bay hedge. A small life deserved an accurate record, too. Next came the children's turn. At the lower curve of the south path was a little place called the Story Ring. It had 7 low stools made from tree stumps, a round stone in the middle, and a half circle of moonflowers behind it. Children came there on open garden days to hear stories from the village elders. Tales of the river, tales of the first bridge, tales of the sheep who found the chapel bell after it fell into snow, tales of the moonflowers. The lanterns in the story ring were always lit, even when no children were there. Especially when no children were there, Lady Isolde thought. A place where stories were told should never be allowed to feel abandoned. She chose small, warm wicks and lit each flower. The 7 stools glowed softly. The round stone became silver at the edges. For a moment, she imagined the children sitting there in daytime, knees muddy, eyes wide, interrupting at the best parts. She loved their interruptions. A story that could not survive a child's question was not yet strong enough. In the story ring, one moonflower had not opened. Its cup remained folded, pale and closed. Lady Isolde knelt beside it. No distress, no damage. The stem was firm. The leaves were healthy. The flower was simply not ready. She touched the air near it, not the petals. "Rest then," she said. "Not tonight." She did not place a wick in it. Forcing a lantern was one of the first mistakes young keepers were taught never to make. A closed flower was not a failed lantern. It was a resting flower. The story ring had enough light without it. Lady Isolde wrote, "Story ring, 6 lit, 1 resting. Leave undisturbed." She underlined "leave undisturbed." Some instructions were for the hand, some were for the heart. The garden had now become a constellation on earth. From the kitchen steps to the herb path, from the fountain to the rose arch, from the listening lawn to the pear walk, from the western gate to the silver grass, from the hush arch to the moon pool, from the south steps to the story ring. Everywhere, soft white, blue, gold, and rose glows marked the paths. Lady Isolde stood at the meeting of the 4 main walks and turned slowly. The garden was not bright. That was important. Brightness wakes. Glow invites. The moonflower lanterns did not try to defeat the dark. They made the dark feel kind. They gave shape to it. They made spaces in it. They left shadows where shadows belonged. Lady Isolde looked up at the sky. The moon was high now, clear and patient. A faint ring of mist had begun to gather around it. By morning, there might be dew heavy enough to bead on every stem. She made a note. Moon ring forming. Expect heavy dew. Cover unused wicks before returning. At last, she turned towards the White Beam Hill. This was the final part of the first lighting round. The path climbed gently through old grass and low thyme until it reached the resting bench. No other part of the garden had such a wide view. The vanity opened below. Astercombe village lay gathered around its square. The Ryder curved beyond it. The mill pond reflected the moon. The orchard stood dark and rounded. The chapel tower looked small from here, almost like a lantern itself. Beside the bench grew 2 ancient moonflowers. No one knew how old they were. Their stone texts were thick as walking sticks. Their leaves were broad. Their flower cups opened slowly and fully, each one wide enough to hold the rose wicks Lady Isolde now carried. She knelt beside the first. The hollow inside the flower was pearly and deep. She placed the rose wick, touched it with the silver taper. The flower glowed. Not white, not gold. A warm blush of moonlit rose. The kind of light that made faces look kinder, hands look softer, and old stone seem less cold. She lit the bench, became gently freed between them. A place held between 2 warm moons. Lady Isolde sat on the bench. The taper stood in its holder beside her. The basket rested at her feet. The rose-lit moonflowers glowed on either side. For a while, she did not write. She only looked out over the valley. Below, 1 cord window remained lit near the bridge, another near the bakery, another above the wedding shop. Wakeful windows. Their working are few. She would not know who sat behind them tonight. Someone reading, someone thinking, someone waiting for a kettle to boil, someone listening to a child breathe after a fever, someone who had gone to bed early but risen again because sleep had not come. The rose lanterns at the bench did not reach those windows physically, but from the valley, They could be seen as two tiny warm points high in the garden. People called them the rest lights. As long as the rest lights were lit, the valley knew the garden was awake, not guarding, not watching, only keeping company. Lady Isolde wrote, "Resting bench, 2 rose wicks from glassblower, both accepted well, valley visible, 3 wakeful windows, rest lights steady." Then she closed the notebook and placed it beside her. A breeze moved over the white beam leaves. The moonflowers did not flicker. Their glow was not flame in the ordinary sense. It was steadier than fire, softer than glass, warmer than reflection. Lady Isolde leaned back against the bench. For a moment, she allowed herself to be only a person beneath a tree. Not the Lady of Silvermere, not the keeper of the Moonflower garden, not the one responsible for remembering which lantern liked which wick. Only a breathing person sitting between 2 flowers, looking down at a valley she loved. That too was allowed. A caretaker who never receives care becomes brittle. A lamp that is never refilled grows dim. A heart that only tends and never rests forgets that it is also living. So Lady Isolde rested. After several minutes, she rose again. The first lighting was complete, but the work of the moonflower lanterns was not finished. Lanterns needed checking. Some grew brighter as the night cooled. Some dimmed when dew gathered. Some turned towards a path and needed to be guided back. Some were visited by moths. Some simply needed to be admired for a moment so the keeper could learn their mood. Lady Isolde began the second round. This round was slower than the first. There were fewer tasks, more listening. At the story ring, the resting flower remained closed. Good. At the south steps, the wall lamp held steady. At the moon pool, a single leaf floated on the water. She lifting it out with the small spoon and placed it in the basket. At the hush arch, the thread wick glowed evenly through all the little flowers. At the silver grass, the bubble wicks shimmered among the stems. At the western gate, the travelers' lanterns lit the latch and the first bend of the track. At the pear walk, the lights turned towards Mrs. Elwick's window continued to glow. Lady Isolde looked down the hill. The high, narrow window was dark now. Perhaps Mrs. Elwick had slept. Perhaps she had seen the pear walk first. Either way, the lights remained. At the listening lawn, Lady Isolde noticed one lantern burning slightly too pale. She knelt beside it. The wick had slipped. Not much, only a little. She lifted it with 2 fingers, cleaned the base with the folded cloth, dipped it once more in dew oil, and replaced it. The flower deepened from pale white to soft cream. Better. She made a note. Listening lawn, 4th lantern adjusted, wick slipped, no harm. The phrase, no harm, mattered. So many small corrections in life could be made without alarm. A slipped wick, a crooked stem, a late window, a tired thought. Not everything needed to become a problem. Some things only needed noticing, adjusting, and letting be. At the fountain, she paused again. The blue lanterns reflected in the water more clearly now. The air had cooled. The stone around the bases held a pale silence. Lady Isolde sat on the fountain edge and opened the loathing top leftover rose wicks. 2 remained. She waking them in brown paper and tied them with thread. Then she looked at the water. For the first time that night, she felt her own tiredness arrive. It came gently, a heaviness behind the eyes, a warmth in the hands, a longing for the quiet room at the top of Silvermere, where her bed faced the east window and her curtains moved when the night air came through. She was not done yet, but she was close enough to begin softening towards done. That was a sweet part of night work. The montext when completion came into voice like a lit window. From the fountain, she moved towards the glass house. The glass house was not part of the main lantern path, but Lady Isolde always seconds inside. Were citrus trees, tender ferns, pots of basil, a small vid trees and trices of opened with a skies. Warm air touched her face. The sympathy inside was green, damp, and faintly broad from the lawn leaves. Moonlight lay o'er Lexington on the tiled floor. There were new moonflowers in the Glockerhall, but in the center, hanging from the rock's bed, was of second past lantern shaped with it was limited on middens with the dark Lady Isolde took a small, clear wick from the emergency pocket of her basket and placed it inside the glass bud. Then she touched it with the taper. The bud lantern glowed from within. The citrus leaves reflected it in little glossy pieces. The fig tree cast a soft shadow. The cuttings on the shelves seemed suddenly less small. Lady Isolde wrote, "Glasshouse bud lantern lit, air warm, lemon leaves bright, cuttings steady." Then she closed the glasshouse door gently behind her. Beyond the glasshouse was the gardener's shed. By day it held spades, forks, twine, seed trays, cloches, gloves, baskets, and all the ordinary things that made beauty possible. By night, it was usually dark. But Lady Isolde opened the door and stepped inside, because one of the Moonflower rules was this: the tools should not be left out of the blessing of light. She did not light a large lantern, only a tiny shelf flower that grew in a clay pot by the shed window. It was a cutting from the oldest moonflower near the resting bench. Its lantern cup was small, but perfectly formed. She placed a little wick no longer than a pin inside it and lit it. The shelf glowed. The spades stood in a row. The twine basket cast a round shadow. The gloves looked as though they were resting after honest work. Lady Isolde smiled. "Good tools," she said. "Sleep well." It may seem foolish to thank tools, but anyone who has used good scissors, a faithful spade, a well-balanced broom, or a favourite cup knows that objects which serve daily become part of the pattern of care. When she stepped back outside, the garden had entered its deepest glow. The moon was high. The valley had gone very quiet. The wakeful window near the bakery had gone dark. The one by the bridge remained. The one above the village shop remained too. Lady Isolde noticed, but did not worry. Not all wakefulness is suffering. Some people sit up because the night is beautiful. Some because they have a letter to finish. Some because they like the world when others sleep. Still, she made a quiet decision. Before the night ended, she would light the little lantern on the lower wall, the one that faced the village. Its glow was faint from below, but visible, a sign that the garden remembered the houses under it. She began the third round by returning to the still room. Not to finish, to refill the basket. The moonflower lanterns did not need fuel in the usual way, but the wicks sometimes needed dew oil to help them receive light evenly. Inside the still room, the air felt warmer than the garden. The flagstones were cool. The dried herbs above the table hung motionless. Lady Isolde set down the basket and emptied it carefully. Used cloth, leaf from Moonpool, broken wick from Western Gate, trimming from Kitchen Flower, packet of rose wicks, notebook. She cleaned the spoon, refolded the cloth, added a little more dew oil to the bottle, selected 3 spare clear wicks, 1 blue and 1 gold. Then she poured herself a cup of warm water from the kettle on the stove. She added a slice of lemon and a sprig of mint. She drank, standing by the garden door, looking out. The lit paths were visible from there. The herb lanterns nearest the house. The fountain glows beyond. The faint shimmer of the hush arch. The rest lights high at the white beam bench. It was beautiful. But more than beautiful, it was calm. Beauty without calm can be too sharp for tired eyes. This garden had learned to glow softly. Lady Isolde returned to the garden and took the small path to the lower wall. This wall overlooked the lane that climbed from the village. Halfway along it was a single moonflower growing in a niche. Its cup faced outward, not towards the garden, towards Astercombe. It was called the village flower. No one sat beside it.
No one passed it inside the garden unless they knew the side path. But from below, when lit, it appeared as a small white point above the ridge. Lady Isolde always saved it until late. It was the flower that said the garden was still awake. She placed a clear wick inside it, touched the taper. The village flower glowed. Down below, Astercombe remained still. But after a moment, the wakeful window above the village shop dimmed. Perhaps a lamp had been turned down. Perhaps the person inside had seen the garden light. Perhaps it was only coincidence. Lady Isolde did not need to claim more than she knew. She only whispered, "Good night, whoever you are." The clock in the village square struck 11. Its sound rose faintly up the hill. Lady Isolde stood still while it rang. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. She did not move during the bells. The garden seemed to listen with her.
When the final note faded, the moonflowers held their light a little more deeply. 11 was the hour of settling. After 11, the garden was no longer opening. It was keeping. That was different. Opening required attention. Keeping required steadiness. Lady Isolde turned back towards the main path. It was time to make sure every lantern could keep its glow until dawn. At the western gate, the travelers' lanterns had attracted a night moth, a large, pale one, almost white, with wings like folded paper. It moved near the strongest glow, not touching the flower, only circling. Lady Isolde watched. The moth did not seem distressed. The lantern was not hot. There was no danger. She left it alone. At the pear walk, a gold wick had dimmed near the old tree. She added 1 drop of dew oil, and it brightened again. At the listening lawn, all 6 lanterns held steady. At the fountain, the blue reflections trembled more because the breeze had finally arrived. No correction needed. At the hush arch, the thread wick glowed evenly. At the story ring, the closed flower remained closed. Lady Isolde checked it again and smiled. Still resting. Good. There was a wisdom in that flower. The others had opened, lit, shone, and become part of the night's pattern. This one had not. And still the story ring was complete. Still the garden was beautiful. Still the path was safe. Nothing was missing. A resting flower does not diminish the garden. A resting person does not diminish the world. Lady Isolde wrote, "Story ring flower still closed. Garden complete without forcing it." She closed the notebook and held it against her chest for a moment. Some notes were worth keeping close before being stored. Near midnight, the sky became clearer. The faint mist ring around the moon thinned. Stars appeared over the ridge. Not many, a handful, but bright and steady. The moonflower lanterns responded to starlight in their own way. Their glow cooled slightly, becoming more silver than cream. The whole garden seemed to shift from evening warmth into night clarity. Lady Isolde walked to the center of the four paths and stood beside the fountain. This was the midnight check. She looked north. Rose Arch lit. Listening Lawn lit. Pear Walk lit. Western Gate lit. She looked south. Silver Grass lit. Hush Arch lit. Moon Pool lit. Story Ring lit enough. She looked east. Kitchen Steps lit. Herb Path lit. Glass House Bud lit. Gardener's Shed Shelf lit. She looked west. Village Flower lit. Rest Lights lit. All well. Then she turned the silver temper downward and let its flame lower. Not out, only smaller. The lighting work was complete. From now until dawn, the lanterns would mostly keep themselves. Lady Isolde sat beside the fountain. The notebook lay closed in her lap. The garden sounded different after midnight. Before midnight, there were still traces of the day. A late bird, a wheel in the valley, a voice in the village, a door, a kettle, a dog. After sighting, the sounds became fewer and wider. Water, leaves, distant river, the occasional movement of something small in the grass, her own breath. She lotusing to each without timing too many. A mind does not need to label existing in order to rest among it. Sometimes naming is useful. Sometimes it is another kind of holding. So Lady Isolde let the sounds be sounds. Let the light be light. Let the garden be gardening. A soft boats came from the path. One of the cats from Silvermere appeared near the herb beds. A gray cat named Juniper. Juniper was old, round, and desktop committed to waxing exactly where the pleased. She crossed-paws the corrupt top with scented and continuing to the fountain. Lady Isolde reached down. Juniper pressed the foot against the aspects. "And good evening, old lantern inspector," Lady Isolde whispered. Juniper gave a low purr. Then she jumped lightly onto the fencing edge and sat facing the body lanterns. She glad pleased, or as pleased as a context ever whose readers below with observing. Lady Isolde, they watched the water. There are few companionships more positful, center company of a creature who does not require conversation. After a while, Juniper left as quietly as she had come. Lady Isolde resumed her walk. This time she did not carving the basket, only the notebook and the lowered taper. Her steps were solving now. At the pear walk, she swept beneath the local tree and placed the child's note back in the hollow, weighted a concerned with the width pebble, not because she needed it, because the child see worth with their recent. The note would be there. But now beneath it, she placed one small fallen petal from a moonflower. A reply without words. Your request was seen. The lights were turned. The path remembered. That was enough. At the western gate, the pale moth had settled on the wall. The traveler's lantern still glowed. Lady Isolde opened the gate a little and looked down the track. No one was coming. Good. A lit path need not be used to be worthwhile. Sometimes readiness is the kindness. She closed the gate gently. At the silver grass, dew had begun to gather. The bubble wicks made the droplets shine. At the hush arch, the glow remained soft and even. Lady Isolde passed beneath it and felt the world quieten again. This time, she thought of no particular worry, only of all the people in the valley who might, at some point, need a hush arch of their own. Not a real one, perhaps. A chair by a window, a cup of tea before dawn, a short walk after rain, a familiar voice, a story, a safe pause in the middle of a difficult week, a place where the mind could stop explaining itself. At the moon pool, the reflection of the moon had moved closer to the center. The water held it beautifully. Lady Isolde sat on the edge and removed her shoes. Just for a moment. She dipped her feet into the shallow step. The water was cool, not cold. It touched the skin with a clarity that made her breathe out slowly. She had done this as a girl, before the garden became her responsibility. Her aunt had kept the lanterns then. Aunt Sabine, who wore lavender in her hair and laughed rarely, but with her whole face when she did. Sabine had taught her the first rule of moonflower lighting. Never light a flower to impress the dark. Light it to comfort the path. Lady Isolde had been 12 and had not understood at once. She understood now. A light made for showing off becomes sharp. A light made for comfort becomes kind. She dried her feet with the folded cloth she kept in her pocket for herself, not the lantern cloth. Then she put on her shoes and wrote in the notebook. Moon pool after midnight. Water cool. Remembered Aunt Sabine. Light for the path, not for display. She smiled. That note might matter someday. Perhaps to the next keeper. Perhaps to herself in winter. Perhaps to no one. Not every note had to prove its future value. Some were written because the present moment deserved to be kept. garden moved towards 1 o'clock. Lady Isolde returned to the still room again, this time to prepare the closing tray. The closing tray was not for extinguishing. The moonflower lanterns did not need to be put out. They faded on their own when dawn approached. The closing tray was for small acts of care before the keeper went to sleep. On it, she placed a glass cover for the taper, a cloth for her hands, the compost bowl, and a narrow blue ribbon. The ribbon was for any lantern that required watching before morning. A blue ribbon tied gently near a flower meant Bennett would check it at first light. Tonight, only one flower needed marking. The gold lantern at the old pear tree had dimmed once. It was now steady, but Lady Isolde tied the ribbon loosely to a nearby support. Not around the flower. Never around the flower. Around the support. A reminder, not a restraint. She returned the broken wick from the western gate to the still room. Broken wicks were not discarded. They were placed in a jar until there were enough to send back to the glassblower. He melted them into new wicks, small window charms, or sometimes tiny beads for children's winter bracelets. Lady Isolde dropped the cracked piece into the jar. It made a small, clear sound. Then she placed the leaf trimming and the moonpool leaf into the compost bowl. The moth remained safely outside. The note remained in the tree hollow. The garden held its lights. Everything was finding its place. Lady Isolde washed her hands at the still-room sink. The water ran cool over her fingers. She dried them slowly. The silver taper, now lowered, rested in its holder. Before returning it to the shrine, she carried it once more to the garden door. From there, she could see almost every glow. It always seemed impossible that such small lights could change the feeling of so large a night, and yet they did. Not by overpowering it, by belonging to it. That was the secret. The lanterns did not argue with darkness. They gave it company. She returned the taper to the glass cup by the eastern window. The silver flame slipped from taper to cup. The brass holder went dark. Lady Isolde placed the glass cover over the cup. The little shrine glowed softly. "Good work," she whispered. Then she closed the notebook. The cover had become worn at the corners. Inside were years of nights, weather, moon phases, which flowers opened late, which wicks failed, which paths needed more light in winter, who had left requests, when the foxgloves seeded early, when the resting bench lights were seen from the valley after fog, when Mrs. Elwick first began watching the pear walk from her window, when Bennett repaired the lower wall lamp, when Aunt Sabine died and the garden was lit entirely in rose wicks for one night. All of it held in pages, not to trap the past, to keep faith with it. She carried the notebook upstairs to the quiet room at the east side of Silvermere. This was her bedroom. Simple, warm, uncrowded. A bed with white linen, a wool blanket folded at the foot, a washstand, a chair, a small hearth, a round table with a book, a candle, and a vase of lavender. The window faced the garden. Lady Isolde set the notebook on the table, removed her shawl, and loosened her hair. She changed into a soft nightgown and washed her face with rose water. Then she opened the window. Cool air entered. From outside came the faint glow of the nearest moonflower lanterns. The garden did not look like work now. It looked like a dream that had learned how to remain peaceful. She stood at the window for a while, watching. The kitchen flower glowed below. Beyond it, the herb path. Beyond that, the fountain walk. Farther still, the rest lights high beneath the white beam tree. The valley below was almost completely dark now. The wakeful window by the bridge had finally gone out. Lady Isolde climbed into bed. She did not blow out the candle at once. She let the room hold both candlelight and moonflower glow for a few minutes. The candle near, the garden far, the body here, the valley beyond. Her hands rested on the blanket. They smelled faintly of mint, dew oil, and glass. Her feet were pleasantly tired, her eyes heavy. She thought of the resting flower in the story ring, still closed, still included. She thought of Mrs. Elwick's pear walk lights. She thought of the travelers' lanterns at the gate, ready though unused. She thought of juniper on the fountain edge. She thought of Aunt Sabine saying, "Light for the path, not for display." She thought of all the small lights in the garden, each doing only what it was meant to do. No more, no less. At last she leaned over and blew out the candle. The bedroom became blue, moonflower blue, night blue, resting blue. She settled beneath the blanket and turned towards the open window. The garden breathed outside, not in any literal sense, but in the movement of leaves, the faint shimmer of lanterns, the fountain far away, the valley river, the occasional settling of the old house. Lady Isolde let the sounds come and go. She did not follow them. She did not count them. She let them be the net beneath sleep. Outside, the moonflower garden kept shining. The first flower by the kitchen steps held its warm white glow. The herb path lanterns lit the thyme, sage, mint, and lavender. The fountain flowers shone blue-white, and their reflections trembled in the basin. The rose arch held its golden softness. The listening lawn rested in 6 quiet lights. The pear walk glowed in gentle intervals. The western gate marked the first bend of the track. The silver grass shimmered low. The hush arch held its chain of tiny white flowers. The moon pool reflected lantern, flower, sky, and stone. The story ring glowed around its one resting bloom. The glasshouse bud kept watch over the cuttings. The gardener's shed shelf lantern shone on the tools. The village flower faced astracombe, and at the highest point, the two rose-lit moonflowers framed the resting bench beneath the white beam tree. The whole garden had become a soft map of care. Not a map one needed to study, a map one could feel. Here is the path. Here is the gate. Here is the place to sit. Here is the water. Here is the flower that rests. Here is the light for the village. Here is the glow for someone who may need it before dawn. Here is enough. Here is enough. Here is enough. And perhaps, as you listen, some small lanterns can be lit inside your own night too. Not bright ones, not demanding ones, only gentle lights. One for the part of you that kept going, one for the part that is tired, one for the thought that can wait until morning, one for the memory that needs softness, one for the body that has carried you through another day, one for the heart that does more than it is thanked for, one for the place in you that is not ready to open yet. That one can remain closed. It is still part of the garden. It is still welcome. You do not have to bloom tonight. You do not have to glow brightly. You do not have to become peaceful all at once. You can simply rest among the lights that are already here. Let the path be visible only as far as it needs to be. Let tomorrow stay beyond the gate. Let the next hour soften. Let the body grow heavy. Let the mind stop checking every window. The lanterns will keep themselves now. The moonflowers know what to do. The garden does not need you to tend it. Lady Isolde is asleep. Bennett is asleep. Juniper is asleep somewhere warm and inconvenient. Mrs. Elwick is asleep by her high window. The valley is asleep. The river continues below it all, slow and silver. The western gate waits. The pear walk glows. The resting bench holds its two rose lights under the white beam tree. Nothing sharp is coming. Nothing urgent is waiting at the edge of this story. Only the garden. Only the moon. Only white flowers holding soft light. Only the feeling of being allowed to stop. Let your shoulders sink. Let your hands rest. Let your breathing become simple. In and out. Slow and easy. Again. If this garden has felt like a peaceful place to return to, Subscribing to the SleepStory Collective keeps the door open to more quiet worlds like this one. There will always be another gentle path waiting when the day has been too loud. Rest well now. Let the moonflower lanterns glow. Let the paths stay soft. Let the fountain pour. Let the valley sleep. Let the resting flower remain closed until it is ready. And let yourself drift gently into the deep, kind quiet of the night. Good night. Good night.